Hi, tribe. It is your mom of three in NYC. Back at you with another video. Hey. Welcome. If this is your first time here, hello. My name is Taneza. I am the mom of three phenomenal kids living here in the heart of NYC. Taking a journey this year. Special journey. I'm reading the Bible for the very first time, and I'd love to have you along. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button. Also, tribe members, I also want to invite you guys, my day ones. Hey, please feel free to share my videos with your friends, family, anyone that you think would get something out of these reviews. I would so appreciate that. I hope I can bless people's lives, through this review of the word. All right. Today is day 9. Day 2 of this week. This week we're reading the book of Exodus. And let's just go ahead and dive right in. Today's review will be of Exodus chapters 7 through 12. All right, let's get into it, you guys. Exodus chapter 7. And the title of this review is God Commands Us. God commands us. So my notes I have, God tells Moses that he has to tell Pharaoh everything he has commanded, and Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. Exodus 7 verse 3 says, "But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in Egypt," verse 4, "he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment, I will bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites. Then the Egyptians will know that he is the Lord. He will bring the Israelites out of Egypt." Moses and Aaron were obedient. When they spoke to Aaron, I have Moses was 80 and Aaron was 83 years old. God can use us, tribe, at any age. Moses and Aaron go before Pharaoh. Aaron throws down his staff. It becomes a snake in verse 11 and 12. Pharaoh then summoned wise men and sorcerers, and the Egyptian magicians also did the same things by their secret arts. Verse 12, each one threw down his staff and it became a snake. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Pharaoh's heart was hard. He wasn't moved because his magicians did exactly the same thing. His heart was hardened. Yet Aaron's serpent or snake ate up all the other ones. God tells Moses to go to the Nile and to wait for Pharaoh the next morning. In verse 16 of chapter 7, "Then say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to say to you, let my people go so that they may worship me in the desert. But until now, you have not listened." Verse 17, "This is what the Lord says. By this you will know that I am the Lord. With the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water of the Nile, and it will be changed into blood." And also, tribe, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, I am reading out of the New International Version. Whatever version you have, stick with it. Moses warns Pharaoh, the Nile will be changed to blood. And there are 3 things that are going to happen. He warns him. 1, the fish will die. 2, the river will stink. And 3, the Egyptians will not be able to drink its water. Verse 19, "The Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams and canals, over the ponds and all the reservoirs, and they will turn to blood. Blood will be everywhere in Egypt, even in the wooden buckets and stone jars." So not just the source of the Nile, but any water. And that's a fact I didn't know before. I didn't know that. I knew the story, but I didn't know that fact. Moses and Aaron obeyed the Lord. So Aaron raised his staff in front of Pharaoh and Pharaoh's officials The water changed into blood. The fish died, and it smelled so bad, the Egyptians could not drink it. Blood was everywhere in Egypt. The Egyptian magicians did the same by their secret arts. Pharaoh's heart was still hard. In verse 23, he turned and went into his palace. Pharaoh did not even take this to heart. Verse 24, all the Egyptians dug along the Nile to get drinking water because they could not drink the water of the river. Chapter 8, 7 days, 1 week later, tribe. The Lord tells Moses to go to Pharaoh. Verse 2, if you refuse to let them go, he's going to warn them. I will plague your whole country with frogs. Verse 3, the Nile will teem with frogs. They will come up into your palace and your bedroom and onto your bed, into the houses of your officials and on your people, and into your ovens and kneading troughs. Verse 4, the frogs will go up on you and your people and all your officials. So tribe, this is not like cute little frogs, like, oh, ribbit, 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 like cute little pet frogs you have in the aquarium. No. Can you imagine covering you, frogs jumping on your body in your oven where you trying to cook food? Oof, oof, oof. I have my notes, up on you, your people, your officials. And I have the note that now Pharaoh's disobedience directly affects others. The Lord tells Moses, tell Aaron to stretch his staff over the streams and canals in verse 5 and ponds and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Aaron was obedient. He stretched his hand, frogs came up into Egypt. Magicians did the same. In verse 8, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, pray to the Lord, take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord. Moses told Pharaoh to set the time for him to pray for him and his officials and his people. Pharaoh says, tomorrow. In verse 10, Moses replied, it will be as you say, so that you may know there is no one like the Lord our God. Verse 11, the frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials, and your people. They will remain only in the Nile. After Moses and Aaron, I have in my notes, left Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs. The Lord did it. He answered Moses' prayer, and all the frogs died. Verse 14 of chapter 8. They were piled into heaps, and the land reeked of them. Can you imagine like dead reptiles everywhere? Verse 15, but when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. Lord told Moses, tell Aaron to stretch out his staff and strike the dust of the ground. Another plague. Verse 17, they did this, and when Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff and struck the dust of the ground, gnats came upon men and animals. All the dust throughout the land of Egypt became gnats. That's my like puke face. Verse 18, but when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they could not. And the gnats were on men and animals. One thing I learned through today's reading was that everything that happened to the Egyptian people also happened to their animals, which makes me kind of sad for the animals. But God's a thorough God. So this is the first, so the magicians were not able to do the plague of the gnats. The magicians told Pharaoh in verse 19, this is the finger of God. They were what's the word? They were convinced. They're now convinced. They were now convinced, the magicians, after they were not able to replicate the same thing, They said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hard. He would not listen, just as the Lord said. Then the Lord tells Moses to confront Pharaoh as he goes to the water. In verse 15, remember he said to wait for him by the Nile. It says confront him. Verse 21, if you do not let my people go, I will send swarms of flies on you and your officials, on your people, and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of flies, even the ground where they are. God promises to deal differently with the land of Goshen where the Israelites are. No flies will be there. In verse 22, but on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. Verse 23, I will make a distinction between my people and your people. This miraculous sign will occur tomorrow. And I was reading this and I was like, you know what? God, through Moses and Aaron, really gave Pharaoh the heads up. He warned him of everything, and Pharaoh's heart was still hardened. Pharaoh tells Moses and Aaron to sacrifice to God here in verse 26 of chapter 8. But Moses said that would not be right. The sacrifices we offer the Lord, our God, would be detestable to the Egyptians. And if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? Verse 27, we must take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God as he commands us. Again, Moses knows absolute obedience, absolute obedience. Up in my notes, there's no cutting corners here. Pharaoh says they can go to the desert, but don't go far, but as long as they pray for him. Verse 29, Moses answered, as soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord, and tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Only be sure that Pharaoh does not act deceitfully again by not letting the people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord. He warns them, you can't pull that same stunt. Moses prayed to the Lord. The Lord answered Moses' prayers. In 31, and the Lord did what Moses asked. The flies left Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Not a, denoting single, not a single fly remained. But this, in verse 32, time also Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the people go.